This afternoon we're going to do some meditation together. My name is Ajahn Sujato, and I'm going to talk a little bit about metta meditation, loving kindness meditation. When we talk about loving kindness meditation, compared to other forms of meditation, it has, I think, one great advantage and one distinctive feature, which is very nice, which is that it's very pleasant. Metta makes you very happy very quickly. And because it makes your mind happy, then it encourages you to keep meditating. It shows you that you're getting somewhere with your meditation, and most importantly of all, it draws the mind in and settles the mind down so that the mind goes to peace and goes to samadhi much more quickly. So the trick to doing loving kindness meditation is, first of all, to realize a simple fact, which is that you all have love in your hearts already. If you don't, you'd be probably a raging murderous psychopath or something like that. And on the fairly reasonable assumption that you're not, then why do we not always go around manipulating and hurting and harming others? Because we have love in our hearts. Now, it might be confused, it might be difficult to see, it might be lost among all of these other feelings and emotions, it might be something that we wish we had more of and we feel like we're out of touch with, and all of those things. But it's there. Even if it's like just a little seed, in a northern winter, like in the frozen ice, and just the seeds are there waiting for the springtime. Or maybe a better analogy would be like in the desert lakes in Australia, that they stay there for many years, dry, lifeless, until one day the rain comes and fills everything with water, and then amazingly, from nowhere, it's full of life. So that's what the experience of doing loving kindness can be like. When the Buddha talked about that kind of meditation, he always used these words like abundance, expansiveness, vastness. He said, make your mind like the great earth. Make your mind like the mighty oceans. Make your mind as vast as the sky. And so in the meditations, any kind of meditation really, but especially meditation on loving kindness, it's not about forcing your mind to be something small. And I don't know what it is about meditation often, that sometimes meditation becomes a very kind of small thing. You kind of focus on this one little thing and you try to concentrate on this one little thing. It's not what real meditation's about. Meditation should be about growing your consciousness. So we should be more aware. And this is something that we experience directly in the metta meditation. We experience what it's like for our consciousness to expand. Not as just an idea, but as a reality. So, like all Buddhist meditations, metta meditation, the outcome of it is freedom. The Buddha used the phrase metta ceto vimutti, the heart's liberation through loving kindness. And so metta in Buddhism is not something which binds you. Normally we think of love as being something binding, don't we? Love is something that restricts you. If you're in love with one person, that means you can't be in love with another person. Somehow. Or even if you're not in love, if you love in a more platonic sense, maybe you love your children, but if you love your children, it means you love them more than you love somebody else's children. So the way that we love, or the way that we're taught to love through our culture, is always limited. And I think that we rarely open our minds to the possibility that the love that we experience, love in the family, romantic love, all of these different kinds of love even with friends, that all of those forms we have are just pale imitations. They're kind of partial substitutes for the real freedom of total love. So when we can do meditation on loving kindness, it doesn't mean that we stop loving our family and our friends. It just means you have a bigger perspective. You have a bigger picture. And it also means that you have a certain confidence inside yourself. And you realize that that love that you feel inside yourself is not dependent on another. It's not something that I can give you. It's not something that anybody else can give you. Actually, it's something that comes from within you. And the happiness that you feel when you're in love with someone, the happiness that you feel when you love your family, when you love your friends. We forget, we don't notice that happiness actually is something that comes from dissolving some kind of barrier, some kind of boundary inside ourselves. And so it's the barriers and the boundaries around our mind that divide me and them, us and them, me and you, good and bad, the right ones, the wrong ones, us lot, them lot. All those kind of boundaries that we have, these are the things that constrict the mind and stop the mind from finding true happiness. So to be able to dissolve those boundaries is something which is very wonderful, very profound. And yet, like all transformations in the mind, it's something that we have to approach with care. The boundaries are there for a reason. And if we're going to let go of those boundaries, we need to do it with wisdom. And so, what can happen in spiritual circles, and is what they call, the psychologists call it spiritual bypassing. And basically what it means is that you ignore and don't deal with the actual day-to-day problems that you have, emotional problems and so on, and you sort of leapfrog over those so that you can be like really angry with your neighbour, but you can have love for all beings, right? So this is not real loving kindness, it's just a shadow of it, it's a facsimile of it. So to develop loving kindness properly, we develop it gradually. Like everything else in the Buddhist path, the Buddha taught a gradual training. And so one way of doing that gradual training is to develop loving kindness through 4 stages, which I'll mention briefly now. Those 4 stages is loving kindness for oneself, loving kindness for a loved person, loving kindness for a neutral person, and for a disliked person. So the method of loving kindness that I teach, we develop metta for those 4 people in turn. And we develop the feeling of metta until it's quite full and strong before moving on to the next stage. So for this afternoon, I'm not going to do all 4 of those stages, but we'll just do the first 2. Loving kindness for oneself and loving kindness for a loved person. So yourself is pretty straightforward. There you are. Sitting there. Being awesome. Being wonderful. Being amazing. And usually also being unaware of that fact. So we're going to do some loving kindness that's going to start with accepting and forgiving yourself. And which focuses on something very simple, which is the idea or the wish that we each have that we want to be happy. That's all. It's very simple. So no matter what you've done, no matter what kind of a bad person you might think you are, at the end of the day you just want to be happy. So it's okay. As well as doing loving kindness for oneself, we'll do loving kindness for a loved person. So before we start the meditation, I want you to think of one person that you can use for the loved person. So there should be somebody who's easy for you to develop loving kindness for. Okay? And somebody who you can develop loving kindness for in a way that's simple and uncomplicated. Okay? No twisted love-hate relationships, please. You can sort them all out in the psychologist's rooms or whatever. But in metta meditation, doesn't matter how strongly you love someone. What matters is how simply you love them. Okay? So it could be anyone. It could be your partner, it could be your children, it could be your parents, grandparents. But just somebody who, when you think of them, then you have that simple, pure, straightforward loving kindness for. Okay, so I've been talking for long enough. Let's do some meditation. sitting quietly. Allowing the mind to settle back inside the body. Just noticing the feelings, the sensations in the different parts of the body, the pressure of the seat, the touch of cloth on the skin, the sounds around. Oh, okay. Just notice how they feel. And now leaving the mind settled in the heart, to say to oneself the words, may I be happy, may I be happy, may I be happy. Repeating those words again and again and again, evenly, steadily, gently. And as you continue with those words, notice that along with the words of metta is something that's much more subtle. And that's the feeling of metta. It's a soft, warm, joyful feeling of loving kindness. It arises in the heart or somewhere else in the body. And when you notice the feeling, you just gently hold it in the mind, keeping it close, keeping it safe. And letting the feeling of metta soak through your whole body. Filling your entire body, every cell, with beautiful, warm, loving kindness. Now moving towards loving kindness for that loved person. Keeping the mind just as it is, settled and centered and grounded inside the body. But changing the words of loving kindness. And may that loved one be happy. May they be happy. May they be happy. Just using the name of that loved person in the words of metta. Keeping the words steady and even, and keeping the focus of the mind on the beautiful, joyful, loving kindness through your whole body. May they be happy. May they be happy. May they be happy. taking that same loving kindness and spreading it out to all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Radiating out from the body, spreading out over the whole world. May they be happy. May they be happy. May they be happy. coming near to the end of the meditation, back to the loving kindness for the loved one. May that loved one be happy. May they be happy. May they be happy. May I be happy. May I be happy. May I be happy. And letting the words of metta go, letting the feeling of loving kindness fade away, and allowing the mind to return to a neutral space, empty, open and clear. Before we finish, taking a minute to reflect back over the meditation, inquiring into cause and effect. What just happened? How did my mind change? Why did it change? What was going on? What was helpful? What was obstructive? How different does my mind feel like now compared to how it was at the start of the meditation? And finally, we can dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu. How are you, Christine? Do we have any questions in the box? Thank you very much. Okay, so I have a few questions. Okay, first question is about addiction. What's my opinion about addiction? It's bad, I don't know. Drugs, any form of parents that had an addiction, past. It's a bit of a rambling question. Eating to resolve pain and anxiety, the need to feel pleasure, avoidance, inability to be. Yes, I think all of those things. But look, I think the basis of addiction really, we are our minds are fundamentally sort of seek pleasure. They seek meaning. They seek to be, and if we're not fulfilled, then we typically will seek those things in the wrong way. And normally there's some kind of feedback mechanism when we seek something. If you try to find some kind of pleasure, and then you sort of initially kind of enraptured by that pleasure, but then afterwards you begin to realize, well, that pleasure has some limitations, it has some drawbacks, and it's best to do that in moderation. It seems like in some people, or for some reasons, that kind of feedback doesn't work, and that people keep on pursuing that pleasure even though they know that it brings harm. And so there's that kind of feedback is broken somehow. So I think from a Buddhist point of view, what we would say is to try to look deeply. I mean, sometimes you need to just manage symptoms, right? I mean, if someone's destroying their lives with alcohol or something like that, sometimes you just need to make them stop drinking. But the important thing we want to do from a Buddhist point of view is to uproot the causes. And so the causes, of course, always is greed, hatred and delusion. And in this particular case, it's a strong greed, but also combined with that delusion. And it's that delusion that cuts that feedback link so that you don't see, or you don't react, or your behavior is not modified by the fact that this is causing harm. So the ultimate solution, or the deep level solution, I would say from a Buddhist point of view, would then be twofold. One is to find a sense of pleasure and satisfaction within yourself that's not dependent on whatever harmful or abusive behavior that you're doing. And secondly is the development of wisdom that's going to actually see the link, that's going to understand cause and effect. And not just understand cause and effect in a conceptual way, but understand cause and effect in a way that will actually make you change your behavior, right? So wisdom in Buddhism always has to be pragmatic wisdom, right? So that's the definition of wisdom, is something that actually has to achieve the results of wisdom. So to understand to a depth that's actually going to make you change your behavior is what I would say, how I would approach addiction problems from a Buddhist point of view. Okay, question number 1. These are from overseas. Dhirayupa from Thailand. Hello Dhirayupa, how are you? Why does it seem easier to send metta to somebody we love, have great respect and admiration for, like Ajahn Brahm, than to ourselves? Well, I don't know, but you are asking the wrong person, Dhirayupa. You should go and see Ajahn Chachai and ask him this question, because he's my teacher. This is one of my students, Dhirayupa, I know very well, but she visits my teacher, Ajahn Chachai, in Thailand, so better off you ask him. But anyway, for the benefit of everybody else, it doesn't really matter why it's easier to send metta to, it doesn't matter if it's easy to send metta to yourself or to a loved one or whatever, it doesn't really matter, okay? So it's not something to be worried about, but it's just something you need to work with. So that the end result is that wherever we are now, metta should be as even as possible. This is what we're aiming for, even loving kindness, whether for myself, a loved person, a neutral person, disliked person. So there's no difference between any of those, right? That's where we're trying to get. So don't worry too much about where you're at right now, but just work with it. And if it's easy to do it for somebody that you love, then you do that. But then you bring that back and you develop loving kindness for yourself as well. So at the end of the day, it should be the same. Okay, question number 2. Nick from the USA. How's it going, Nick? Ajahn Brahm often talks about a story of a Vietnamese monk who was in meditation for 9 days during a retreat. Could you please tell us that story to inspire us? Well, I'm not quite sure if it's the same story, but I heard a story, a monk who actually visited us when I was at Santi Monastery a few years ago. And I won't say his name here because I'm not sure how public this information is or whatever, but anyway, when he was visiting, his supporters and so on told me this story. And one of the things that, in Buddhism, that lots of people tell lots of stories, right? So I don't necessarily take things on face value. There's a lot of kind of exaggeration and so on goes on. However, in this particular case, I knew these people very well, and when the monk came to visit, he was a very impressive monk. Anyway, I always remember that monk because he came and he sat down and we were talking and so on. They asked about what meditation we do there and so on. And then he said, how long do you meditate for? And I said, usually we'll sit for about an hour or something like that. And he said, oh, okay. He said, have you ever sat for much longer than that and reached any stages? it's a kind of intimidating question. You just kind of met this senior monk. So anyway, he was kind of an intense guy. Anyway, according to the story, he was teaching a retreat in Vietnam some years ago, and the first day of the retreat everyone came into the meditation hall to sit meditation, and they came to listen to the first Dhamma talk, and he came and sat down on the Dhamma seat and just sort of sat. And then he just kept sitting, and he kept sitting, and he kept sitting, and everyone began to realise there wasn't going to be a Dhamma talk that morning. Nor was there a Dhamma talk that afternoon, nor was there one that evening, nor was there one the next day. And I think it was about a week later or something like that, he sort of came out of meditation. And I think that's kind of the ultimate teaching on a meditation retreat, isn't it really? There's no words. Anyway, so it's very inspiring to know that there are people who can do that kind of thing. I don't know whether he did that deliberately. Sometimes some people can go into very deep meditation states and sort of control that and do that deliberately. And other cases, people just sort of slip into it and might not have intended to it. I don't know which was the case. I mean, if someone's really a developed meditation master, then of course they can always control it. Okay, so Paul, question 3. Paul from the USA. How's it going, Paul? Could you give us some sutta references for metta meditation leading to samadhi? Some sutta references. Well, there's a number of different suttas that talk about loving kindness. Obviously, the metta sutta itself. There's the sutta in the 11s about the 11 benefits of loving kindness, and we also have a sutta like the Kakatupama sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, which is very nice, talking about loving kindness and the ways of using speech and so on and practicing it. But the best resource on that, if you want sutta references for metta meditation, the best resource is actually a little booklet that was written by Venerable Nyanamoli quite a few decades ago now. It was published in the Buddhist Publication Society Wheel series. I can't remember the title of the book now, but it's something about metta or loving kindness or something like that. And of course, Venerable Nyanamoli always did a very excellent job when he did these things, and he collected a number of different passages from the suttas on loving kindness and then translated them very nicely and put them together with an introduction and so on. So I'd recommend, if you want to look for sutta sources for loving kindness, then get hold of that book. So it's a little booklet by Venerable Nyanamoli in the Buddhist Publication Society Wheel series, and I believe that the Wheel series, all of them, or anyway, I think a lot of them are all available on the Buddhist Publication Society BPS website. So I think you should be able to find that online. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think you should be able to find that. Okay, so that's Paul from the USA. Very good. So does anyone have any more questions before we finish up? Then. Do you want to repeat?
You were saying in the opening talk that when we are doing loving kindness meditation, we often leapfrog over those people that we're having a problem with. And just concentrate. How do we resolve those people that we do leapfrog?
Okay, so the question of leapfrogging over people, it's not a specific thing with loving kindness meditation, but it's more, I think, a general thing with spiritual practice. And I think it's actually extremely common, if not normal, in spiritual practice that people kind of espouse very kind of exalted values, right? Whether it's in Buddhism or any other religion or something like that, and we go around saying God is love or something like that, and then act in ways that are really highly dissonant with those values that we say we're going to have, right? And I think we see that kind of thing within every religious path, and we certainly see it within Buddhism. And of course, the reality is that the Buddha was an amazing man, an amazing teacher, and taught it from such an incredible level of purity and wisdom that it's a challenge for any of us to try to aspire to that level of purity and wisdom. So often what tends to happen is that we can externalize our religion, right? We can make it into something that can become just words. And for example, if I've heard people who've been in get in an argument with somebody and something, and then they're like, "Oh, may you be happy," and there's this kind of passive-aggressive metta and these kinds of things, right? And and the whole message is, well, I'm a Buddhist, and so I'm pure, so I'm better than you, so suck it up. And so I think one of the points with spiritual practice is very, very important is that we be grounded as much as possible on things that are very simple, very everyday, and that, yes, of course, we keep that context in mind, that we know that there's a magnificent spiritual arc and spiritual perspective that we're given through the Buddhist teachings. But we remember where we are right now and how we're dealing with the people that we are with now in the situation that we're in now. This is always the most important thing. So in the metta, how that applies to metta meditation is that we spend a lot of time just developing metta for ourselves. It's very easy to sort of to go and do metta for everybody else, and then you forget that you're actually really uncomfortable with yourself. And that might feel fine for a little while, but at the end of the day, you're going to be sitting alone in a dark room by yourself. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then you're not going to be, your metta meditation or any other form of meditation is not going to be solid. It's not going to be really grounded. Yeah? So I think this is one of the most important things. You can find this kind of message taught in many different suttas. I'll just give you an example of the kind of thing that I'm talking about. For example, would be the Buddha gave the sutta about the pussycat and the big bull elephant. Do you know that one? The sutta on the pussycat and the big bull elephant, and the big bull elephant wades into the river, swift, flowing, deep river, and has a bath and trumpets and has a great time splashing around and splashing water all over himself, and put little pussycat sitting on the bank and watching the elephant and thinks, wow, that's really good. Why don't I wade into this deep, swift-flowing, fast, strong river and have a nice bath as well? So they jump into it, and of course, they're swept away to their destruction. Poor pussycat. This is a terrible simile. It's very traumatizing. But anyway, you get the idea. And the point of the simile was, if your meditation's no good, and you go off into seclusion, you're living in the forest, you might think, oh, look, these great arahants and the Buddha and all these great disciples and yogis have been and meditated in these caves and these wild places in seclusion in the forest. Why don't I do the same thing? And so then you're a little pussycat and you're trying to imitate a great elephant. Yeah. So again, this is the kind of thing that it's not about sort of leaping over and trying to get to that place, but it's about understanding where you're at now, what's going to be good for you to do now. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like we're about running out of time. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention, and let's finish by paying respects to the Triple Gem.